Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, the question that everyone is asking, when will India enter a third wave of COVID? Will we enter a third wave? Well, we look at the R number, which gives an indicator of where we may be. And I'm going to explain what that means in a while, because the news is quite worrisome. Also on the show this evening, India has had a long military equation with Afghanistan. We may not speak about it, but it's been there. Tonight, an exclusive interview with the Afghanistan ambassador to New Delhi and his expectations on how India can help as the Taliban makes inroads in his country. So the big focus that we are looking at, cases declining, but the COVID R number going up. Therefore, is India headed for a third wave? Now, for starters, in a simple two sentences, what does R rate mean? Well, the R, or reproduction number of a virus, tells us how easily it spreads in the population. It's the average number of people onto whom an infected person will pass the virus. The higher the number, the more contagious it is. So do we have a third wave warning sign linked to the R rate in India? Well, here's what we do have. We are now in the fastest rise in the reproduction factor since mid-February, from a low of just 0.72 to 0.95 in just 31 days. Let me just explain what these numbers are, now that we have it full screen. The line graph in the bottom is actually a line graph which represents the number of cases. And as you can see, there was a mountain, the peak of the cases going up, and then it went down sharply. But the line graph on top of that is the R factor that we are talking about. And in many senses, there is also a peak and then it goes down. But the R factor right in the beginning, on the extreme left-hand side, in the upper line graph, is similar at a point to what it is right now, which is where it is on the extreme right-hand side, where you see the arrow. So therefore, the question is, if this is what it is now, similar to what it was just before the second wave started making itself felt, are we headed to a third wave? From a low of 0.72 to 0.95, which is what it is presently in just 31 days. It was on the 14th of February when the R number was this high, 0.95. That's what I was referring to on the extreme left-hand side of the screen. Quite clearly, cases are up. In fact, on the 19th of February, the second wave began to take root. Daily average cases started rising, and they ended up snapping a declining trend. So the key difference since then, is there a key difference? Well, yes. In mid-February, the average daily cases were around 12,000. Today, it's 41,000, which is a big concern. Is there a silver lining? Well, the average daily cases continue to decline since the second wave peak. What is there to watch out for? If this declining trend snaps and cases start rising, that's when things will start going dreadfully wrong, and that is the big worry. Joining us now, Dr. Shahid Jamil, virologist and director of the Trivedi School of Biosciences at Ashoka University, Dr. Shashank Joshi, and Dr. Deep Kumar Debarma, who is the nodal officer for COVID in Tripura. The northeast of our country is a big concern now, with COVID rates going up. Let me come to Dr. Jamil first. In your assessment, sir, based not just on the R factor, which I looked at, but other numbers or statistics, do you believe a third wave is inevitable?
Well, a third wave may come, and it will depend upon three things to my mind. The first is how well people behave. And over the last few days, certainly over the last 2 weeks, what we are seeing is behavior at its worst. The second thing is what are going to be the vaccination rates. Vaccination has slowed down. If you see the data from early July till now, we are giving about 3.5 to 4 million doses per day. It dips to about 1 million, 1.5 million on Sundays.
Right.
Now, India needs to vaccinate at about 8.5 to 9 million doses per day in order for us to achieve vaccination aspirations that we have set for ourselves by the end of this year. And the third factor is going to be whether a more infectious variant, and I must say more infectious than Delta that we already have, if that emerges. Thankfully, the third one hasn't really happened. We have not seen that happen as yet. Delta Plus is not that one. So let's start behaving properly as an individual.
Actually, that's an important point, Dr. Jamil, and I don't know if Dr. Joshi, you agree with that. You know, we were talking about Delta Plus, very, very concerned about it a few weeks back. In fact, on this program, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan of the World Health Organization told us that in fact, I mean, it is a variant which is of concern here in India. The World Health Organization would certainly consider that as well, but perhaps it's not where we were worried it may be. Is that your assessment, that Delta Plus is not the threat we thought it might be a few weeks back? Dr. Joshi?
No, I still think that we know precious little about Delta Plus, so I can't rule it out. But Delta is the primary virus, and the Delta is the fast spreading virus. And I think the third wave is inevitable. The question is the timing, and people's behavior can make this timing very quick and fast. We are still not out of the thick tail of the second wave in Maharashtra and Kerala and many other geographies, including Northeast. And in absence of that, it is a likely possibility that if the behavior of people does not change and people don't behave responsibly, I think we will transit in some of the geographies straight from second wave to third wave. That's the concern and worry. And if a Delta, see, we are dismissing Delta. The R naught of Delta is, you know, the 3.5 has gone up to 8. It's a cluster spreading and a more transmissible strain. So my worry is the primary Delta. Delta Plus may be more sinister, we don't know, because the numbers were too small to make any predictions. So I think the Delta Plus, if it emerges, it will be a bigger threat, as Dr. Jamil is saying, or whether it will be a lesser threat, we don't know. I think the data was too small and we need more numbers on the Delta Plus.
Okay.
But our concern is very clear. In absence of 2 doses not being given to a large proportion of India, if you see the vaccination with the 38 crore Indians vaccinated, only 7 crores have got two doses. So this is the biggest worry we have. So in absence of vaccination, we have to have zero tolerance for COVID appropriate behavior and protocols, number one. And number two, we have to have very stringent public health strategies to contain the current concern in the next month and a half to 2 months. Otherwise, by September, the way you showed the graph, we are already going to be in the third wave. That's very clear cut. If we are not able to reverse the trend, it looks plausible that the government is very alert. Both state and central governments are very alert. They are on their guards, and I think they will try to delay and defer it as much as possible, but they will need full cooperation of people at large. And if congregations and crowds do not stop, then we are doomed.
All right. One good step today, the Kanwar Yatra has been blocked in or will not happen in Uttarakhand, in a small state which saw very large numbers. This is a great step that the state government has done. Steps like this should have been taken earlier on. But let me go across to Dr. Debarma, and let's bring up the Tripura numbers. The Tripura R factor is above 1. It's presently at 1.05. 71,315 cases so far, 566 new cases, 4,245 active cases, 717 deaths. It's a small state. First dose 52%, so that's good, that's great that you've reached that. And second dose 16.5%. Still, obviously, a lot needs to be done. Dr. Debarma, why is the R factor in Tripura at 1.05, and how concerned are you?
One thing I want to clarify that the first dose is 50% what has been reflected on the screen. It has updated because as of now 78%, almost 78% of the state population has been vaccinated with the first dose, because it is the data which we have shared with the in the VC of the Honorable Prime Minister today. This is the one thing. And regarding the R factor is 1.05. It has now reduced to 1.02. So some fraction has gone down. This is data. And definitely R factor more than 1 is a matter of worry for everyone. Definitely we are working on that. As we know, initially the first wave and the second wave starts usually from the western side of the country and the northern Indian side. As per the geographical location of the northeast, you just verify from your sources that in the first wave and the second wave, it hits gradually 1.5 or 2 months later from the other parts of the country. So we are now on the mid or in the end stage of the second wave. So definitely we are expecting that within a coming 2 weeks, the curve may go down in the northeast, unless and until the virus mutated itself in that phase in the northeast.
Dr. Debarma, I'm trying to understand. You mentioned that 78% first dose vaccinations have taken place already. And active cases are actually still rising, right? In Tripura?
Active cases is rising.
If 78% of people have received even the first dose, then why are active cases rising?
No,
is that linked to the efficacy of the first dose, or do you see hotspots where people are not vaccinated?
Mr. Vishnu, one thing we must realize that the vaccination does not mean that the person does not get infection. That we have to realize that, because as far as the number of active cases, out of the 4,200 plus cases, 1,300 cases are there those who are vaccinated, and out of that 1,300 cases, 600 to 650 cases are vaccinated with the first dose, and 400 people are vaccinated with both the doses.
So 1,300 people are vaccinated, and what percentage of these have had just one dose?
One dose around 600 plus.
600 plus.
And
rest so of a little less than 50% of these individuals who are COVID positive have had one dose, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. So, and the point you're making is that we shouldn't make an inference between being vaccinated and not having COVID. So, would you suggest, therefore, the vaccine, Dr. Debarma, is only good enough to prevent progression to serious disease?
That's the main thing. The severity of the disease is much lesser, because after the vaccination started, what we observed, the number of hospitalization cases has decreases.
Okay.
So definitely the progression of the disease to the severity is
this is an interesting point. Let me get Dr. Jamil's reaction on this. Sir, it is a sad reality that, goalposts have been shifted by doctors around the world. When we started talking about vaccines 1 year ago, we said that if you got vaccines, and certainly if you got 2, chances are that you would not get COVID. It would be a statistical anomaly. Today, we are now talking about how you get 2 doses and you will still get COVID, but it may not be very bad. So therefore, how would you analyze these numbers in Tripura?
Well, let me say that yes, the goalpost shifted, but that was an aspiration when we started.
So just like it was an aspiration that we would have that high number of vaccines. So the word aspiration is bad in the present context. But let me not interrupt you.
I don't want to comment on individuals or organizations, but that was aspiration. This is reality.
Right.
But the fact is that there are actually very few viral vaccines that give what is called sterilizing immunity. Sterilizing immunity means that you will not get infected and you will not get disease. Most viral vaccines will prevent disease and not prevent infection. Okay, so this is a point that we should consider and keep it in mind.
Okay.
The real world data of COVID vaccines the world over has shown that yes, you can get infected, but you will produce much less virus, so therefore you will transmit much less virus to others, and you will also be protected from severe disease. In fact, Tripura and Manipur, if you compare these two neighboring states, there is a stark difference between the oxygen requirements of these two states in the second wave. And the only difference between these two states was what percent of the population above 60 had at least one dose. That was the only difference. So yes, vaccines do prevent severe disease, and that's been shown not just in India but everywhere else.
All right.
So let's keep vaccinating, because we don't
ultimately it saves your life. Bottom line, chances are it will save your life. Let's hope we don't have to shift the goalpost any further on that. Dr. Joshi, you had a point to make before we wrap this up. Go ahead.
So a quick point, I think we should not take the Tripura example, the number is too small. Public health is based on most of the time, most of the people. And I think on that principle, the breakthrough infection rate is extremely low. It's 0.003, 0.004. So please, we have to break vaccine hesitancy. We have to vaccinate as many people as possible. Yes, you might get infections in an occasional rarity, but it is not a standard rule that everybody will get infected. But people who are single vaccinated must be precautions. They should take COVID appropriate behavior. In even double vaccinated people,
no, but Dr. Joshi, just to interrupt you, I mean, isn't the Tripura number just yet another pointer to why we must have the second dose faster?
Correct. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But we need sufficient supplies to make that target done. But even with a single vaccine, we make a huge dent on mortality numbers as well as on severe disease numbers. So getting the first shot is as important as getting the second shot.
Absolutely. Well, I think more than anything else, we need to encourage people to get out and get vaccinated, because the consequences of not being vaccinated at all in a situation where this virus is perhaps more dangerous than we thought it was a year back, there is no option. You just have to get vaccinated. Unfortunately, a third wave does seem likely. The question is when that will happen, perhaps a few weeks, perhaps a few months. In order to protect ourselves, besides the vaccine, social distancing and the mask. That's what's going to save a lot of lives. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being with us. For decades, for centuries in fact, India has been a friend of Afghanistan. And Afghanistan as a country has seen so much violence over the last few decades. And yet again, after 20 years of relative peace and a birth of a solid democratic movement in the country and elections, there is a return of the Taliban, which is capturing a lot of areas on the ground. Afghanistan needs the help of the world now, with the United States having moved away from Afghanistan after 20 years, and the international community moving away as well. Thousands have lost their lives. The question is it just a matter of time before the Taliban take over Kabul? Hopefully that will never be the case. Joining us now, a very special guest, His Excellency Farid Mahmoonzai. He is the Afghan ambassador to New Delhi. Sir, my first question to you, there are now reports which are coming in with visuals, in fact, of the Taliban having killed, and sadly a large number of Afghanistan's special forces who had apparently surrendered. Can you share knowledge or information on this?
Yes, this happened in the province of Faryab last month, where 22 of our special forces were brutally murdered by Taliban at a time when they were surrendering. They had either surrendered or about to surrender, violating all human values and violating all norms and laws of the war and conflict. Sadly, we lost those 22 brave men in a very cruel and brutal manner. We lost people who were about to get married next month, or the end of this month, rather than at that time next month. Very professional, trained forces of our armed forces. The most elite branch of our armed forces is formed by our special forces, and they were murdered in cold blood by Taliban in a very cruel and brutal manner.
Ambassador, what is the ground situation today?
The ground situation sadly is very dire. It's very problematic. We are having active fight going on in around 150 districts out of 376 districts. So 1/3 of the country is in active fight. Taliban, after the withdrawal of international forces, which largely started on the 14th of April all the way until today, which would complete by the end of next month, Taliban exploited this opportunity, which they should have given to peace. They inflicted heavy losses of both lives and infrastructure on the Afghan public, on the Afghan people across the country. Our security forces are doing everything they can to ensure the safety and security of the public, but we took the attacks as surprise in various parts of the countries,
right?
In various parts of the country. So some of the attacks came as a surprise. We were under the assumption that Taliban would take the peace process seriously and they would negotiate a lasting and dignified peace with the Afghan government. Yet, and on contrary, they chose the path of the violence, and they chose to destroy key infrastructure which had taken us years and billions of dollars to build. So the situation on ground is not very good. It's grim. We had more than 200,000 people displaced internally since April 2021, since the past 2.5, 3 months. Closer to 4,000 people have been killed. They had lost their precious lives, and most of it because of the atrocities committed by Taliban and their associates.
Right. Sir, in a situation like this, how is India helping? Now, we've had very close equations, even military equations in terms of training, the transfer of helicopters. What is India doing now?
One way of helping us was with the soft infrastructure that we needed the most, and that was to educate a lot of our young people, a lot of our civil servants, provide vocational and technical trainings to many of our government employees in various sectors. That was one help that India had generously provided. We received 1,000 scholarships a year, and there are closer to 20,000 Afghan students across India today. India built us the new Afghan parliament, the Friendship or Salma Dam, Shahtood Dam, and several other infrastructure projects. In the military side, India has also again helped us with two key components. One was to help us with providing us military training scholarships for our cadets, and second was to help us with military hardware.
Right.
India has so far provided us 11 helicopters. Now, as we go into the future, we count on India as a very close and credible and reliable partner. We seek again to support initiatives to support areas from India. One is to help us with the peace process, utilizing its conveying power in the region and internationally to put more pressure on Taliban to come to the negotiating table. And second, should we not get to a stage in the peace process with the Taliban, then there may be a time when we would be seeking India's military assistance, more military assistance in the years ahead.
So,
a fact to be remembered that we are not fighting a civil war here. We are fighting global terrorism and extremism.
Are you looking for Indian troops on the ground? Are you looking, or are you looking at Indian pilots flying your helicopters? Because a lot of your pilots in the Afghan Air Force have been attacked. They've been killed in the recent past.
First, we are not seeking India's assistance with sending troops to Afghanistan. Their footprint in Afghanistan to fight our war would not be needed at this stage. We can do the fight ourselves. Secondly, Air Force is an area which require a lot of assistance from countries like India. We have a young but a very dynamic Air Force. It is being developed at the same time while we fought many battles. We would be seeking India's help with training our pilots, but not having Indian pilots in Afghanistan to do our fight. I think the Afghan pilots are capable enough. Yes, we had sadly the losses. We had witnessed the losses of several of our pilots in the recent months. But as we lose some of the pilots, some of the planes, helicopters, we train more, and we have more pilots currently on trainings. So the training process is being taken care of well, and we procure more military hardware, more helicopters. We have recently received helicopters from the United States. We will be receiving more helicopters in the months ahead. And there may come a time when we would require more air support, and India is naturally a place where we would be exploring such opportunities to acquire more air support.
All right. Well, Ambassador, very difficult times for your country, and hopefully that peace process will result in something positive, and hopefully the bloodshed we are seeing on the ground will cease.